Okay, the next topic that I would like to discuss with you is what the limits are on criminal law. In the 80s and 90s, we saw many laws passed by Congress that were critical, or that were criticized, I should say, by several legal scholars about concerning whether or not Congress was criminalizing areas that they had no business criminalizing based on the fact that areas are already regulated by the state governments. One particular legal scholar that's discussed in the Cliff Note version of the criminal law, Mr. Walker, complains that many laws that are on the books criminalize behavior that doesn't harm anyone, and should behaviors that do not harm anyone or that harm the public in general, should they be criminalized? And one area that is very controversial and is currently very heavily looked at by individual states is the decriminalization of marijuana, which is an important topic for this module because, as you will see, this is a discussion board issue, and this is an issue that many states are currently looking at. In Connecticut, although it has not been legalized, as it has been in Colorado, the possession of small amounts of marijuana are, instead of being treated as crimes, are infractions or which are punishable by merely a fine and do not result in a criminal conviction. Many proponents of changing our drug laws, particularly the marijuana area, argue that small amounts of marijuana should not be criminalized and treated more like we treat alcohol sales, which is in effect what the state of Colorado has done. Proponents of legalizing small amounts of marijuana or possessory amounts of marijuana argue that it is no more harmful to a person than drinking alcohol. And certainly there is medical evidence that goes back and forth both ways. Excuse me. In fact, we see in many cases marijuana is currently being used as a form of medical treatment for certain illnesses to minimize the effects of certain drugs that people are required to use. So this is one area of the law that is evolving and will continue to evolve. But more importantly for the discussion of the criminal law section is there an over-criminalization? And if there is, how can it be dealt with? Do we discard some of our laws? Well, some people argue that, in effect, many prosecutors decriminalize certain behaviors by the technique of plea bargaining, and that through plea bargaining, it is in effect a way of minimizing some of the criminal behaviors, but it is an important aspect of their criminal justice system. Without plea bargaining, our courts would be greatly overwhelmed. But it is particularly interesting in the area of marijuana decriminalization because although many of the statutes are currently being examined as far as decriminalizing the possessory amounts of marijuana, the whole idea began way back in the 1970s, particularly in the state of Florida. And although the state of Florida did not decriminalize marijuana back then, what it did was it reduced many of the statutes that were felony statutes for mere possessory offenses to misdemeanor uh, misdemeanor criminal offenses, so that persons with possessory amounts of marijuana would not be facing criminal or having a felony conviction on their record. And the reason why this occurred was many constituents in Florida of different senators were highly critical of the fact that their sons and daughters who were in college and were experimenting with marijuana were ending up having felony records, and all of the implications and burdens associated with felony records. So although this is a new current trend in criminal justice, and as we look around at the different states, most notably in Colorado, where in fact the sale of marijuana by certain locations is authorized, and possession of marijuana is no longer a crime. This is an area that is continuing to evolve, and many suggestions like the one Mr. Walker makes in the Cliff Note version of Criminal Law Book is being looked at as a way of preventing people from having criminal records for conduct that is not seen as threatening to the public, harmful to the public, may be harmful to the individual user, but not harmful to the public.